welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. I will discuss Delhi's edition, dated 11th December, with you today. Let's get started. If we take a look at today's newspaper strictly from the examination point of view, we'll not be able to find any news worth covering until we reach page 8. We come to page 8 where we will see crunch time at WTO. This news must be complemented with another news on page 13. The news on page 13 titled WTO Diverse Views Fuel Bleak Prospect for Outcomes. The editorial and the news relate to the World Trade Organization, which is holding its 11th ministerial conference at Buenos Aires in Argentina. The conference is held at a time when there is a growing debate between multilateralism versus protectionism. We all have heard the term globalization, that is, all the countries in the world trading freely and fairly with one another. On the other hand, protectionism means that one or two countries are involved in a bilateral trade. This would mean that the countries would have the freedom to set prices. Since its inception, the World Trade Organization has been striving to promote free and fair trade. However, most of the WTO conferences that are held once in 2 years have suffered due to the divergent views between the developed and the developing world. While the developed world is stressing on 21st century trade issues like e-commerce facilities, investments, and gender equality, the developing world, including India, stress to resolve the outstanding issues like public stock holding, like in India, where food is stocked and then distributed through public distribution systems or PDS. Other issues like food security and special safeguard mechanisms, commonly called the SSM, that allow countries like India to increase tariffs to prevent the import of outside products. Measures like these are necessary to protect the farmers and prevent price rise. An interesting point to note is that India and China have presented a joint proposal in the WTO to force the developed countries to end trade distorting farm subsidies. These trade distorting or trade disturbing farm subsidies that are given by the developed countries to their farmers so that their crops, for instance, let's say rice, becomes cheaper in the international market, are technically called aggregate measurement of support. The developing countries have been laying stress to end these aggregate measurement of support. In fact, a lobbying group called G33 that includes India, China, Indonesia has backed this joint proposal of India and China. As the conference advances, greater clarity would arise of the future of WTO. The important things to remember from this news is the G33 aggregate measurement of support, the different views of developed and developing world, and a few facts about the World Trade Organization. Another interesting fact about WTO is that it is headquartered in Geneva, which may be asked in the prelims examination. Let's move on. The next article that we will cover is A Game of Chicken in the Korean Peninsula. The article relates to the problem of North Korea's nuclear weapons. In the first part, the article has argued that the world today does not have a military option for the removal of these nuclear weapons of North Korea. This is because any military action would trigger North Korea's counteraction, leading to a nuclear attack against South Korea, Japan, and the US. Further, it is stressed that the world must accept a nuclear powered North Korea. This is because North Korea, even after several sanctions and pressure of the world, has shown no inclination to remove its weapons. Further, the leadership in North Korea realizes that once dictatorial regimes like Gaddafi and Saddam halted the development of nuclear weapons, they were overthrown. The article has further stated that to ease tensions, the world must engage in talks with North Korea. To solve the crisis in the Korean Peninsula, the international community must accept North Korea as a nuclear power, as this would allow us access to the country. Further, the six party talks that included the USA, China, Japan, Russia, North Korea, and South Korea must be reformed. In news like this, it is important to understand the map as well. If we look at the map, North Korea is bordered with China and shares great proximity with Japan. This map shows North Korea's capability to attack Guam, an island territory under the administration of USA. A question can be asked on the members of the six party talk and about the location of this island Guam. Let's move on. Next, we come to page 12, where we will discuss ICANN receives Nobel Peace Prize. The International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or the ICANN, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize at a ceremony in Oslo. ICANN is a coalition of 468 non governmental organizations or NGOs that campaigned the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Let us look into this treaty. The treaty was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2017 as a legally binding instrument. It seeks to prohibit nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the only weapons of mass destruction that have not been prohibited yet. All nuclear powers of the world, like USA, United Kingdom, France, Russia, China, Pakistan, India, have refused to sign this agreement. Further, the treaty needs to be ratified by the majority of the countries to come into effect. This treaty is significant as it bridges a gap in international law in the fight against nuclear weapons. We come to page 14, Business Review, where we'll first look into steel is the answer to goals of smart cities. The article talks about the Smart City Project of India. The Smart City Project is a visionary project of Government of India to provide high quality of life by providing infrastructure, connectivity, technology, environment, and availability of resources. The government aims to develop 100 smart cities in India. This it would do by renewal and retrofitting. Thus, the 100 cities would see building of flyovers, community areas like parks, shopping centers and hospitals, airports, and efficient city sewage systems. To make sure that the smart city project is a success, the article has pitched the idea for the use of steel. Before we move on to the benefits of steel, one important point that we should remember is the smart city project is being implemented by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. As all of us are aware, steel has a wide area of usage. The article has stressed that most of the infrastructure that we would eventually use in the smart city should be made of steel. The benefits of steel are structures made of steel are long lasting and can be easily retrofitted. Use of steel leads to faster execution of projects. As steel is 100% recyclable, it is environmental friendly. Use of steel in irrigation reduces wastage of water. Another important aspect on the selection of a material for building infrastructure is the cost. While steel may be costly in the short run, in the long run, steel is the most efficient material for building infrastructure. Across the world, steel is being used to build the cities of the future. Creating new cities and upgrading older cities can be achieved fastest using steel. The article relates to infrastructure, which we can see in GS paper 3 and hence is important from mains point of view. A prelims question can also be formed on the smart city project and the implementing agency of this project. Let's move on. Coming on to the next news, in search of a genuine hallmark. The government is aiming to introduce a mandatory hallmark regime to bring transparency in the gold sector by early 2018. To understand the need of such a mandatory regime, let us look at the present status of hallmarking in India. Let us assume that this figure right here is the consumer, the jeweler, the several hallmarking centers in India, and the Bureau of Indian Standards. Presently, all the jewelers in India tend to go to the hallmarking centers spread across India. These hallmarking centers then give their hallmark. A hallmark is a certificate of quality. The purity of gold is generally measured in carats. We all are aware that a 24 carat gold is 100% pure. The consumers then buy these jewelries from the jewelers that may be hallmarked or not. In the present system, all the hallmarking centers in India then eventually report to the Bureau of Indian Standards, where all the data regarding the registration of hallmarks is collected. There are several issues in this present system. First, the hallmarking of jewelry by the jewelers is not mandatory. Next, hallmarking centers have often been accused of dabba hallmarking. Let us understand what dabba hallmarking is. The hallmarking centers across India levy a charge of rupees 35 to hallmark a jewelry presented by the jeweler. There are instances where the jeweler agrees to pay only rupees 10 for the hallmarking. The hallmarking centers then agree to give the hallmark for just rupees 10 with the condition that they do not report this hallmark to the BIS. Further, they tend to give higher quality certificates to lower or inferior jewelry. For instance, a 20 carat jewelry may be given a 22 carat hallmark. The dabba hallmarking thus causes a threat to the consumers. The next issue is the evasion of tax. As the hallmarking agencies do not register the data with BIS, jewelers are able to evade the royalty that is paid to BIS and thus evade tax. Simply put, the present system has become a channel for black money and undercaratage of purity of jewelry. That is, a 20 carat jewelry may be classified as a 22 carat hallmark. This has led to the consumers paying more money to the jewelers. In an attempt to solve this problem, the government is introducing a mandatory hallmarking regime. This would ensure that all the jewelers hallmark their jewelry and all the hallmarking centers report to BIS. Another change would be that there would be three caratages of 14, 18, and 22. As these three standards would have a significant change in purity, it would be difficult for hallmarking centers to grant hallmarks to undercarated jewelries. If the move is implemented, it would increase the income tax and prevent consumers from cheating. The only unaddressed issue that is left is the BIS. BIS is the Bureau of Indian Standards that grants the certificate of quality to jewelry in India. It is also called as the National Standards Body of India. It is a statutory organization under the BIS Act 1986. The BIS functions under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. The article has relevance to both prelims and mains. A question in prelims can be asked on BIS, the proposed hallmarking mandatory regime. A question can also be formed on the present regime of gold certification. Let's move on. Let's move on to the news. What does the FRDI bill do for you? The news deals with the Financial Resolution and Deposit Insurance Bill. We all are aware that India had introduced the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code for the easy winding up of companies. But what about the financial companies like banks, insurance firms, mutual funds, and others? What if these financial corporations fail to bring clarity and make sure that a quick solution is available for such failing banks? The FRDI bill is being introduced. A bill like this would give clarity on whether the bank should be sold, merged with another bank, or stopped from functioning. Citizens of a country deposit their savings and surplus money into banks. Banks then manage this money, which can be later on withdrawn by the citizens whenever they want onto their convenience. Now, if a bank fails, the government is left with generally two alternatives. One is the traditional bailout. If you have closely followed the news over the years, the financial crisis of 2008 spectated the bailout of many banks. By bailout, I mean the government uses its money to save the bank. But where does this government get the money from? This money is the money of taxpayers. However, this route of saving banks has been questioned by economists, calling it a moral hazard. Thus came the other way to save the banks called the bail-in, which is being increasingly used in across the world. In bail-in, the banks are made to use the money of the stakeholders. This would also include the depositors' money. Over the last few days, a great amount of fear has spread regarding this bill, as the bail in clause of the bill may mean that the money of the depositors may be used to save a bank. The bill provides for setting up a financial resolution corporation that would decide on the measures to be taken to save a bank. In a country like India, where financial firms like banks depend upon depositors' money, which in turn make the maximum portion of savings, financial stability of a bank is very important. Several banks in India have become too big to fall, and hence a systematic arrangement when they become vulnerable is essential. Presently, the Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation guarantees that in case of failure of a bank, the depositors or the people who save money in the bank would get at least rupees 1 lakh. The FRDI bill has not mentioned this minimum amount that would be guaranteed, and hence the fear is spreading. The bill has been referred to a parliamentary committee. The only things that we need to remember right now is the role of Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation and the difference between bail in and bail out. Let's move on. Next, we move to page 18, where we will first look into NASA probes AI for space connect. This news introduces a very important term for prelims examination called cognitive radio. Simply put, cognitive radio means space communication combined with artificial intelligence. Satellites communicate with Earth using radio waves. If we assume the satellite as S and Earth as the surface, the satellite would communicate with Earth using these waves. Presently, the stations on Earth are human controlled. Hence, if NASA wants to decide what the satellite would do in the next instant, a human would feed in the task and the satellite would perform the task. Don't you think if this task giving is automatic, it would improve the efficiency and make the satellite respond to Earth's commands in real time? This is what a cognitive radio does. Artificial intelligence or AI is the ability of a machine to learn from itself. Thus, if radio systems on Earth have artificial intelligence, they would no longer have to wait for human instructions. This would allow us to control satellites in an autonomous, reliable, and efficient manner. A question on cognitive radio can be asked in the prelims examination. Let's move on. Next, we will look into the news how marine organisms degrade plastic bags. Like the earlier news, this too relates to an important concept from the examination point of view called microplastics. Microplastics Microplastic is any plastic that is less than 5 millimeters in size. Being small in size, it becomes difficult to segregate this plastic and hence it finds its way into water bodies, eventually making it to the oceans. These microplastics are often ingested or taken up by small fish and other marine organisms, which can cause detrimental effects to their health. The microplastics also include microbeads. This too is a very important term. The microbeads are very small plastics which are less than 1 millimeter. Microbeads are often used in cosmetic products like scrubbers and day to day used items like toothpastes. The Bureau of Indian Standards has termed the use of microbeads as unsafe. Moving back to the news, a recent study has shown that the marine wildlife is contributing to the spread of microplastic. An amphipod or Chestia gammarellus has been found to break down plastics into microplastics. The spread of microplastics in marine environments is very harmful. Moreover, these organisms showed the same rate of breaking down, be it any plastic, conventional, degradable, or biodegradable. Interestingly, a coating of biofilm, that is organic matter, on the plastic increased this breaking down by as high as 4 times. The spread of microplastics is very harmful for the marine environment. The major takeaway from this news is: what are microplastics? What are microbeads? And how their spread is causing harm to the marine environment. With this, we come to an end to today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for today. Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to ask questions in the comment section and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.